I've done it in the past, and they've made me look rather stupid.
I've got him down to win a slam in 2027.
And I'm going all in on this one. You can join me or think I'm mad. I'm going to say...
Welcome to Off Court with Greg. I'm here with the local team, which we always have. Kevin Palmer from Tennis 365, Ashley Neaves, the tennis mentor, one of the best coaches in Britain, and myself, Greg Rusedski. We're going to actually do the top 10 stories that will dominate 2026. But first off, we have to talk about the big breakup everybody's been talking about, Carlos Alcaraz, Juan Carlos Ferrero. The rumor has it that Juan Carlos Ferrero only had 2 days to decide on a new contract. There was supposed to be big reductions. I'm not so sure I believe that, because the fact that you have Tony Nadal, the coach of Rafael Nadal for most of his career, think it's a communication thing. It's something that happened on court because it was midway through the season. Feliciano Lopez thinks that Carlos won't be the same player without Juan Carlos by his side. And Alex Correcha, another great Spanish player, said this is a very, very sad moment because the partnership was working so well. So was it the agent that got into negotiations that wrecked his partnership? We would love to know the true story. Kevin, what are your thoughts?
Do you know what, Greg? I think we're all guessing what the story is, aren't we? That's the wonderful thing about this kind of thing. We're all waiting to find out what the real inside story is. We might never know. The truth is, a lot of the media are guessing. A lot of the media do this. This is what we do in our world. We kind of like to pretend we've got the inside knowledge on everything, but quite frankly, we don't. We're waiting to find out from Carlos. We're waiting to find out from Ferrero. At the moment, neither of them have really made any public statements. There's been the little release on Instagram just to try and kind of give us a hint of what happened. But when Carlos gets down to Australia, there's going to be plenty of questions. There's going to be plenty of answers that we're waiting for him. I'm not convinced we're going to get a lot of them. Part of me, though, thinks, is this going to work? If Carlos is in Australia, he doesn't do well. Let's say he goes out in the third or fourth round. That'd be a major shock for him, given what he's done the last few years. Would he then try and look at getting Ferrero back in and thinking, I can't do this without Juan Carlos? I don't know. That's possibly what Ferrero is thinking. If he sits back, says nothing, doesn't rock the boat at the moment, there could be some way back. If you look at his statement when he said he was going to end it, he said, I'm quite happy to go back. I'm hoping to go back and hope this might be reinvented one day, so to speak. So let's see how this all works out. But I'm not convinced this story is entirely over between these two. There's such an incredible bond between them. And I'm sure, Ashley, you would join me in saying that when you've worked with a young guy from that age, it's very difficult to try and replace him. And certainly for Carlos Alcaraz, who's he going to get in? What are your thoughts on where we're at with the story at the moment?
Absolutely. I mean, they are like a family, and I don't think that bond is ever going to break. I'm pretty certain that Ferrero will have involvement in Alcaraz's game in the future. How that looks, we don't know. But just like you both say, this is all speculation. We covered it in Off-Court Cuts last week. We spoke about all of the things that are possibly bubbling under the surface, and it's just come to a head. Whether it's financial, whether it's a bit of a ruck between Alcaraz's dad and Juan Carlos. I'm not sure we'll ever know, actually. But I think one thing is clear: anytime change happens in anything, especially in a coaching team setup, it does create uncertainty, but also it creates opportunity. And I think that's what we've got to look at with Carlos's game. Is there an opportunity for him to improve in certain areas of his game? And, yes, he is, one of the best players on the tour right now, but there are certainly things within his game that could be tweaked. And I think he's in a good position now going into 2026 with, Samuel Lopez, somebody who he's very, very familiar with, very, very comfortable with on court, who knows his game and his processes inside out. I think that is a good thing. I think if he were to be changing to a completely new coach, that could be difficult. And if that were to happen in the future, which it might, it's going to be a difficult role for anybody to take. They're going to have to be a very, very strong character, because Carlos himself is a strong character and he's probably got lots of needs and lots of opinions. I almost think, I was thinking to myself the other day, that he almost needs somebody from Rafa's team to join his camp, because he's very similar to Rafa in many ways. He likes to party. I think not many people realize that Rafa also liked to party behind the scenes as well. So, maybe someone like Carlos Moya could be a good addition to the team. But I don't think we'll ever really know what went on.
Greg, I've got a question for you, actually. As a journalist, as a tennis fan, we don't really get to know what happens with a coach in terms of finances. What did they get paid? When you paid your coach, was it a percentage, or how does it all work?
Well, it works for a player. It's always different. So if you're an established player already, usually it comes out, you get a base salary, then you get bonuses depending on where the ranking comes on and what they do at the majors usually. So everybody's contract's a little bit different, but the relationship between Carlos and Juan Carlos is a little bit different because he came to his academy as a 15-year-old. And when you're 15 years of age and not from a well-to-do family, usually what happens there's an arrangement for future earnings. So you basically don't pay for your coaching, you don't pay for the gym, you don't pay for the physio, and that is taken up by most likely, I'm assuming, by Juan Carlos Ferrero. But what happens in that stake is then sometimes you get a percentage of prize money or of endorsement value for the future after you've paid off the debts of the coach putting in place those things. So maybe that could be one of the reasons, because maybe the numbers and the sidelines, whether it was money for contracts, money for appearances, and prize money, could have possibly been part of the contract still. And maybe Carlos felt, okay, I want to give you more of a basic contract where this is your salary, these are your bonuses for tournaments, but you don't get a bit of the prize money and you don't get a bit of the contracts. So maybe that's where they were at loggerheads, because the fact that they've been together so long, 7 years, and when you're 15, 16, 17, you're not really making any money unless you're lucky to sign some big contracts. So it's either the coach that takes that on, or it's the management company that fronts you the money for percentage of your contracts in the future. So maybe that dynamic could be at play, but we don't know the whole story.
We often hear about pop stars, don't we? Musicians signing a contract when they're 15 and like,
Because you
wow.
know Louis Walsh.
Well, yeah, I know. Well, my dad's been involved in the music industry, so this has been my world to a point. Somebody like Louis would have probably signed Boyzone to a pretty rubbish contract to start with. Does that happen in tennis where a kid is signed up and then ends up giving half his money away, sort of thing, for the first few years?
That's not abnormal. We've seen that with the court case with Sasha Zverev with his agent, which went to the high court. Tommy Haas was funded by a group because they were minors when they signed the contract and they went to court. The contracts were null and void because they weren't with the parents or they were still a minor. So sometimes those things don't hold up. But I know some of the agents get the youngsters to sign these contracts in perpetuity for playing certain events from a very young age if they don't read the small print. And that's where it gets a little bit dangerous at times. And you've got to be careful about those things. So you need someone who's looking after you and looking after your best interests. But as I said earlier, if you're not from a country where they have a federation that can help support you, a family that's wealthy, or a sponsor who takes interest in you, this is sometimes your only route to making it as a tennis player, because it is an expensive thing to become a professional tennis player.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, going back to Carlos and Juan Carlos, we were all pretty certain that it wasn't really a financial thing when we spoke about it in off-court cuts and thinking about different things that are bubbling under the surface. And I think if the communication was great within the team, I don't think this financial thing would have come to a head. So, there's definitely something else going on in the background.
Well, and the timing of it mid-season, because you're halfway there and then all of a sudden this breaks up. I hope they find a path back. Boy, is this Australian Open going to be exciting, because we all can't wait to see Carlos's debut, the press conference starting the year and his first event. And on top of that, can he make his first Australian final? It's the only major. He hasn't been to the final. He hasn't won. So a lot of eyes will be on Carlos.
He's got less points to defend than possibly he should, right? Where did he get to last year?
He lost to Djokovic remember Andy Murray coaching Novak, and we're thinking, okay, this is an inspired coaching appointment. And unfortunately for Novak, he got injured against Zverev in the semis. So historically, he's had some funny losses there. He lost 1 year to Berrettini as well, and he just doesn't kick out of the blocks as quickly as Sinner has. And let's not forget, that was last year, 2024, when Sinner beat Medvedev from 2 sets down to claim his first major. And that's when the Sinner-Alcaraz train started ticking on.
So linking this in with, we're going to be talking about the 10 big things that are going to be happening next year, from our opinion. We've actually got a little interview that Kevin had with Taylor Fritz where he was talking about his chances against Carlos. So yeah, let's check that out now.
The win against Carlos at Labour Cup is I know it wasn't a tour event, and you'd probably rather do it in a Grand Slam. But does that change your mindset a little bit? You've got one over those guys now.
Yeah, man. I think I always say in doing anything that I do, I think being able to do something once, whether it's beat somebody, get to a certain point in a tournament, go deep in a Grand Slam. I've always felt like once you do it once, it feels for me a lot easier to do again and again and repeat. And yeah, I think it definitely helps. I played a great match, but it gives me, I guess, a clear, outline of, what I need to do and what I can do to make it work.
Yeah. Has it been tough? Because those two guys come in and almost, I said this to Alex Zverev midway through the year, it kind of felt like your time to come on, and then these two have kind of stolen the party. But how do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, they're two incredible players, and I think that they push, at least for me, they push me to keep improving and becoming a better player to try and compete with them. And I think that's, I mean, for me at least, playing Carlos, I felt like when I played him at Labour Cup the previous year, he played well, and I just felt like there was absolutely nothing I could do. I had no chance. And then this year, Labour Cup, and then even in the finals of Tokyo, I felt like I felt like the level was much closer, and I feel like I've done a good job kind of improving and getting closer to that level.
Okay, we're going to talk about the top 10 stories we think are going to happen in 2026. I'm going to start with number 1 on the WTA Tour, Elena Rybakina. She had a great finish to the season where she beat Sabalenka in the finals. I have a feeling we talked about rivalries. I think it could be Sabalenka and Rybakina because of the fact that she is such a dominant force in the game. She's won Wimbledon. She's been to major finals multiple times. She's got the game. Off court, she had a lot of difficulties because there was an investigation by the WTA into her coach, and that has been cleared now completely. So she had multiple coaches last season. Goran Ivanisevic started the year, left after the Australian Open. Davide Sanguinetti was the coach, and then Stefan Volkov, her coach, is back, who's Croatian as well. And since then, her results have improved dramatically. And I think with that partnership, she's going to go from strength to strength, contend for majors. I wouldn't be surprised if she goes on to win the Australian Open, but I think she is the hot tip to win Wimbledon this year just because of her game, her power game, everything she was through in 2025, and she seems to be back to her best.
For me, she's unbeatable, Greg. When she's at her best, actually, as well. I mean, when she's on top form, I just think Rybakina, which we should say, is almost unbeatable in terms of her serve is so strong, her ground strokes are so strong. We saw what she did to Emma Raducanu at the US Open, absolutely took her apart, and it's that level of play that she can just take the racket out of your hand, and I think that's why she, for me, favourite for Wimbledon. If she stays fit, that's been the issue. She's had a lot of, it seems like allergy issues and things like that, and then illnesses that she contended with, not always physical. So we need to see if she can stay fit. If she can stay fit, the big threat to Swiatek and Sabalenka, definitely.
Yeah, I'm with you both on this one. I think, like you said, Greg, if her coaching team settles, she's had a bit, a tough year with that, then I think the rest of her game is going to settle, and she is a formidable force when she's on fire. So yeah, great call for number 1, Greg. Moving on to number 2, I'm going to make a call about Jack Draper. Now, there's a lot of uncertainty around him right now with his injury. He's been off for an extended off season because he had bruising to his bones in his arm, stress, basically injuries. But he's been training hard. He was hoping to get back into a couple of exhibition matches in December, but he didn't. So although there's uncertainty, I do still think that Jack is possibly the next contender for this big Alcaraz and Sinner rivalry. And I actually got to chat with him a few weeks ago, and he spoke to me about how he's looking to adjust his game slightly in 2026. And there were 2 main things. Number 1, he wants to become more aggressive on the court. He's a big guy, he's a big hitter, but he's generally in the past been most comfortable in defense. He's now looking to do more damage with his serve, and being a lefty, as you know, Greg, can be a big weapon, but equally trying to shorten points and trying to get into the net a bit more frequently. And so from a tactical and technical standpoint, if he can really make those changes through this off-season, as soon as he gets back onto the tour, as long as he can stay injury-free, hopefully during this off-season he's done a lot of work to to really, not just get stronger, but to prevent future injuries. He's going to be a tough player to beat, and he's definitely one that can contend with these big two. The second interesting thing that he spoke about was actually more from a mental standpoint, and I spoke to him. I knew him as a kid playing up because I used to coach a couple of players that would play against him at junior nationals, and he said to me that he used to be quite an arrogant and cocky kid on the court. However, as he's grown up and matured, he's become very good at controlling these things. The interesting thing he said to me was that in 2026, he actually wants to come out of his shell a bit more and to express himself because he feels like he's gone into himself. And we were talking about this on our previous episode. I think it's important that, players know how they perform best. And if Jack feels like he needs more expression to play that slightly more aggressive game, then we could see a different Jack next year.
He's quite a shy guy, actually. I've spoken to him a few times, and I've spoken to his brother Ben quite a lot as well, and who's his agent. And Ben wants him to come out of his shell a little bit and show a little bit more of himself. And I think in the last year, despite the injury problems, he really has done that. So it has been good growth for Jack in that department. But obviously, this arm problem is a major issue. One interesting point about Jack is he does most things right-handed and plays tennis left-handed. So that's similar to what Nadal used to do back in his day, which almost makes him, he hasn't got a weakness on either side in that way. So that's an interesting facet of Jack's game, and maybe one reason why he's so strong. The lefty, Greg, how useful is that big swinging out wide serve that Jack can do?
Well, I don't think there's so many lefties in the top 100 in the world these days. So that's a huge advantage because break point, closing out the game, you get that big lefty can opener as well, and you can pop it down the tee. I think that's something he's improved over the last 2 years. But as you say, health is his wealth. If he's healthy consistently, that's going to be the key. I've seen him training a little bit during the off season at Wimbledon as well as the National Tennis Center. The movement looks exceptional. Ground strokes, he's firing. It's the serve. Can he get that power, that pace back with the bruising he has? And that's going to be a key ingredient. And I think expressing yourself and being your authentic self helps you as a tennis player, and actually having that honesty. If swagger is natural to you and you've done that since a young age, usually it's swagger. If you're a little bit more calm but confident calmness, then be that. So I think that's a real positive. Don't take away from the person you are. And if he's healthy, he is definitely competing with those guys because, from the back of the court, I've seen massive improvements, trying to hang on the baseline on top of it a little bit more, willingness to come forward a bit more. So he is improving his game. And if he can stay healthy for a period of, say, a year, 2, 3 years, then you put him in the mix with those top two guys.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I've got him down to win a slam in 2027. That's my prediction.
Well, I think that's fair because I think it's going to still take more building. And if we remember Andy Murray, the last British man to win a major, winning Wimbledon twice, US Open, Olympic gold, he said it was 7 years of physical work to get him to that stage to win his first major. And for him, he's still in the process of building, and he hasn't had the good fortune of Sinner and Alcaraz, who's barely been injured. And if they catch an injury, they're usually back within 2 weeks or a week. And that's where he needs to make sure that he gets everything in place. He's got a great team around him. So let's wish him well and hope he has that fitness to accomplish that. Because boy, would we love to see another Brit win a major.
One thing that he has to do is deal with that Wimbledon buzz in the summer. You've done it, Greg. I mean, it's a very difficult for a British player to go into that. I remember seeing him at Queen's. There's all the pressure on him. Is he going to, how's he going to deal with that? And this was his first kind of summer without Andy Murray to deal with that. Greg, how tough is that, trying to deal with that Brit?
I think it's difficult depending on how confident you are. If you're playing well, it's an absolute bonus. If you're playing poorly, it's an absolute nightmare. And that's getting the balance. And, this year at Wimbledon, everybody was saying, oh, he's going to be playing Bublik in the third round. You got to remember there's some dangerous players. He lost to Marin Cilic, who has been a Wimbledon finalist, great player, US Open champion. So the depth in the men's game keeps on getting stronger and stronger. And I think he'll find a way to express himself and find a way to crack the code. He's willing to talk to Tim Henman. He's willing to talk to Andy Murray. He talked to whoever he wants to, and his brother will reach out for advice to help him to get there. So I think he's a problem solver, and that's what you have to be if you're going to become a great champion, and especially with the expectation as a Brit, especially being the top man at the moment.
Right, guys, on to number 3, and I'm going all in on this one. You can join me or think I'm mad. I'm going to say Jannik Sinner is going to win the calendar Grand Slam this year. He's going to win all 4 majors. He's going to clean the board up. Alcaraz's split with Ferrero is going to throw him off track, and there's no one else out there that can beat him. Am I mad, Greg? Tell me.
No, I don't think you're mad at all. I think you've got a real shot. Do I think he's going to win the calendar slam? We saw Novak try to do that. He was 1 match away against Daniil Medvedev a few years back and lost it at the final hurdle after winning 3 majors. If anybody can do it, it's Jannik. He has great memories in Australia to start the year. Can he bounce back at the French Open is going to be the big question. And as you say, Carlos Alcaraz, where's he going to be? There's lots of question marks going into the season. But if anybody can do it at this moment, it's that man, just because he keeps on improving. I've been watching a few clips of him practicing in Dubai. He is getting stuck in. He's working on approaching to the net, transitioning from the back of the court. Brilliant. Lots of players says he has 2 forehands on each side. There's actually not a backhand because the way he moves into it and slides into it. He's a complete player. And this thing upstairs, the brain, unbelievable how strong he is mentally. So I don't think it's a wild prediction.
The reason I say it actually is because if you look at last year, he was 1 point away from winning the French Open. Probably should have won that match. And then if he'd have done that and won Wimbledon, he'd have been 1 win at the US Open away from the calendar Grand Slam last year. So he got nearly as close as Novak did. Novak was 1 match away when he lost, I think, Medvedev in the final at the US Open, wasn't it? So Sinner was only 1 point less than that, really. So that's the second closest attempt we've seen to the calendar Grand Slam. So Ashley, what do you think? Can he do it?
He can. The question is how much scar tissue is there from that French Open defeat, and how will it affect him? And I'm certain that it will affect him in a positive way and give him fuel and hunger to take that title. But again, like Greg said, it really, really depends on Alcaraz and how he bounces back from, this situation. Yeah, the French is probably the one that he's going to have the most trouble with, I would say. On hard courts, Jannik is the man to beat. He's proven that he could do it on grass as well. And like you say, he can do it on clay, but he's got Alcaraz in front of him. So yeah, it really depends on Carlos, but it's not a crazy shout, but I'm going to go against it. I don't think he'll get all 4 this coming season.
I think you're on a pretty good bet there, but you also got to remember he had 3 months away from the game as well. So he almost finished number 1 with 3 less months. The thing which will be interesting is how he schedules himself. And you can't win the calendar slam without winning in Australia, and he's got to be the favorite to defend his title there, having won it the last 2 years. So you got to win the first one to get that road. But if he wins the French, we're going to be talking about Kevin's prediction, that's for sure. But he's got to at least win the opening 2. Number 4, the breakout player of the year on the WTA Tour, Victoria Mboka. Quite interestingly, I work with a Brit by the name of Ben Jones sometimes, and his practice partner, David Quayle, is the hitting partner of Mboka. So I get a little inside information there. Max Tektukian as well is the coach with Natalie Tozia. Maxim Tektukian as well. I was working with him when I was working with Victoria Azarenka right now. So she's got a phenomenal setup of a team. And also as a Canadian last year, she beat Naomi Osaka in the finals of Montreal, backed it up at the end of the year by winning another title in Hong Kong. I hear the work ethic is unbelievable. She is putting in the hours off court, on court. Great expertise around her. She's not happy being 18 in the world at 19 years of age. She is the real deal. To me, she's cracking in the top 10, top 5, going to be threatening to go deep at the majors. Is she quite ready enough to win a majors? Possibly not. I go 2027 when she wins her first major, but she is going to be knocking on the door. She is that good.
She was 333 in the world, I believe, at the end of last year, which is an incredible number. So she didn't get anywhere near the Australian Open a year ago. So that makes her progress in the last 6 months, back end of last season, completely incredible. I mean, she got a reasonable draw in Canada in some ways, but then beat some top players at the end of it. Really proved herself to be a top player. So I'm with Greg. I think she can have a great year. She's got no ranking points to defend basically for the first 6 months of the year. So she's got an open goal to try and get into the top 10. I think she's 18 at the moment. I think she is at the moment, which is still incredible for a player her age. If she can rack up them ranking points before those 1,000 points drop off from Canada, she could easily be in the top 10 by the time we get to the French Open.
Definitely. And I think the key really is just getting matches under her belt, so that she can get that time on the tour, physically, mentally, tactically, develop her game. If she can stay level-headed and keep playing lots and lots of matches on the tour, then I have no doubt I'm with you there, Greg.
The other thing I want to add to that as well, Andreescu, remember she won in Toronto and then went on to win the US Open? Very similar. How do you deal with pressure and expectation? She wins her home tournament in Montreal, which was massive in Canada. Everybody was talking about her. She couldn't walk around the street. She's huge in the country. She's got that swagger. She's got that game. She's a nice person. She's got the weapons and the tools. She's a phenomenal athlete. The serve can keep on getting better. There's so many aspects of her game. And the nice thing is she's got a great set of people around her. So for me, the sky is the limit. And we're talking about new stars. I think she could be the next big thing for the WTA Tour.
Okay, so moving on to number 5. One change that's going to be happening in 2026 is there is a new rule on cooling breaks. So, some of these tournaments, players are having to compete in some extreme temperatures. And there's a new rule that you're allowed a 10-minute cooling break if temperatures go above, I think it's 30.1 on the wet bulb globe temperature, which I had to Google. I wasn't sure what that meant. What it is.
Yeah.
Have you heard that? Have you heard what this means, Kevin and Greg?
Oh, no, you carry on.
I'll go with it. So there's a dry bulb. There's a dry bulb temperature, which is basically the air temperature as it is. But the wet bulb temperature is a combination of the air temperature, but also the humidity and how that affects the human body's way of cooling down, basically. And if this number rises above 30.1 within the first couple of sets, then you can have a 10-minute cooling break. So I mean, there's a few tournaments in the calendar, not loads, but there's a few tournaments like Shanghai. I think the temperatures were crazy. US Open, Australian Open also can get very, very hot. So it's just good to see that some of the players are being heard and their welfare is being thought about. We've obviously had other complaints all the way through this year and the last few years on balls, the variance in different balls that are being used on the tour as well. So, who knows what rules are going to be changed later down the line.
Well, I'm glad to hear about the heat rule because they have it in the WTA for the women. They have a 10-minute break in between sets. We saw in Shanghai with Holger Rune complaining about it. We saw Jannik Sinner, one of the fittest guys, cramping on the court, which is unheard of with the fitness regime he goes through. So it's about time we had this in the men's game. The tennis balls, please, it's such a simple solution. Get one ball, make a batch, stick a sticker on it, whether it's Wilson, Slazenger, Technifiber, whatever the ball is, and just play the same ball throughout the year. Worst case scenario, have a hard court ball, grass court ball, clay court ball, make them as similar as possible. Make life easy. We've been talking about this since the last century when I was playing. This is where there's always been talking about getting a player union to help players out in difficulties, to get the things they'd like out there. There's got to be discussions out there because nobody will know if the ball's different, as long as the logo's stamped on it, if it's the same. We're going to reduce shoulder injuries. We probably wouldn't even be talking about Jack Draper's elbow bruising had we had a consistent ball for him throughout the season. It reduces injuries, and heat rule, thank goodness for that. Finally getting it in the men's game, which should have happened ages ago.
I was down out in Wuhan actually, guys. October it would have been, and wow, the heat was absolutely extraordinary. I mean, I when you're in this cool press room and there's lovely air conditioning and you're getting nice water given to you all the time, it all feels very nice. But I just walked out to the practice course and the wall of heat that hits you, and it was just like, you can't play tennis in this. And Emma Raducanu had major problems. 2 or 3 of the players pulled out. I think Ostapenko might have pulled out. Really, really difficult to play in. And, there was a roof on some of these stadiums and they don't want to put them on. It's almost like, I know we want to keep them as outdoor events, but if the temperatures are that hot, why are we trying to, put the players through this? It just seems crazy to me.
Number 6, new owners of 2 Master Series in Madrid and Miami. It's Evolve that's taken over that. It's Ari Emanuel, and really fascinating that they've put in a new woman co-tournament director, Muguruza, the Wimbledon champion, who's Spanish, with Felicio Lano Lopez in the men's. The reason they've done this is because they feel that the women's event has not had the due respect in Madrid. The scheduling of the finals for the women's, the doubles finals, the presentation ceremonies, the big cake to Carlos Alcaraz on center court, Sabalenka, the world number one, a small cake off court, just giving equal rights, equal prize money, and running it the way it should be. In the past, there's been a lot of controversies in Madrid, and they haven't had the same spotlight for both events as they do in other Master Series. So I think this is great news. Great to hear the new ownership taking responsibility of the situation in Madrid. Glad to see it happening.
I love to see, former players getting involved in tournaments. We're seeing more and more of it, actually, nowadays. I think, with Muguruza, she's been there and done it on the tour. She knows the situation with differences between women's tennis and men's tennis. So, she's going to do great things, I think, for that tournament.
Laura Robson's doing a great job at Queen's last year, and at the first time we had a women's event at Queen's, which was a major success, because there was some concern how many, would the tickets sell as well as the men? And the men sells out instantly at Queen's, and it has done again for next year. And the women's is a little bit slower, but the crowds were amazing for this year at Queen's. So that's something to really look forward to. One of the big success stories on the WTA tour last year was that event at Queen's. So here's hoping we get more of the same next year.
And also the big announcement, as well as Mercedes-Benz getting into it with the WTA Tour. The growth of the women's game keeps on going up and forward, and they've got a lot of stars coming forward. You look at it, Coco Gauff winning in the French Open, Madison Keys, what a great story, winning the Australian Open. Then all of a sudden you had Wimbledon, Świątek, the biggest surprise. Nobody saw that one coming, especially the scoreline in the finals. And then Sabalenka, who's been in almost every major finals, finally winning the US Open. Almost feel like redemption, having lost a few finals previously going into that. So a lot of positives for the WTA, but we want that big rivalry to come, or we want 5 or 6 players positioning himself week in, week out to win the major titles.
I think it's coming, Greg. We spoke about it, didn't we, in the Battle of the Sexes episode? I think the rivalry is coming. You're looking at Sabalenka. She is showing better consistency. We've got Gauff. If she can, sort out her serve, I think she's going to be up there with a call with Iga, Rybakina, and Anisimova did well this year as well. So, I think there are some really, really strong contenders to create this group that will...
So number 7, I'm going with Ariana Sabalenka and saying what an amazing job she's done from where she was at the start. I wasn't convinced, I don't know about you guys, when she came through, whether I liked Ariana Sabalenka. The screaming kind of got on my nerves when she hit the ball. I wasn't a big fan of it. She was kind of hard to like in a way, but what she's done, with the Netflix show, which obviously didn't work out for tennis in the end, but what she's done with her social media channels, amazing access she's given to her fans. And I know my 13-year-old daughter, she's a massive Sabalenka fan. She loves watching her doing her TikTok dances, huge audiences, huge reactions on social media. She's an engaging character. I was at press conference with her all last year. Really, really interesting and engaging responses. So I think Ariana Sabalenka has been not only a great advert for women's tennis, but a brilliant example of how you can almost turn around what people might have thought of you at the start and what they think of you now. I don't know what you think, Craig. She's a ray of light in the women's game, isn't she?
She is. And you know what I love about it? Consistency of team. Her hitting partner's been a childhood friend for many, many years, practiced together, so knows her very well. She's kept the same coach for many, many years. Jason, who does her physical fitness, is doing all these movement patterns and special exercises, which you can see on social media. So she's very specific what she wants. They're very frank. They're very honest. They're very transparent on what they need to do. She had a serving coach because she had the yips on her first serve, trying to solve those problems. So she's always looking to get better and put the work in. I managed to see her a few times in Boca Raton when she was practicing in Florida with her team. Played against her a few times when I was on tour in 2024. A great team of people around her, ultimate professionalism. And it was quite interesting because the year Osaka won her first US Open, she beat Sabalenka, I think it was in the 4th round or the quarters. And I was looking at those two players saying, who's the one of these two who's going to be number one? And we thought Osaka was going to be the dominant force when she won those 4 majors. But it's Sabalenka who's stuck with it now and is the world number one, looking to win more majors. This year, she's been in almost every major final or every big event. and she's stuck with it. She's not let anything bother her, and she still won the U.S. Open. She should have won the French Open. She was brilliant the way she beat Swiatek, and then the conditions got to her. She said the wrong things in the press conference after losing to Coco, but has bounced back brilliantly. So huge fan of her, huge respect, great team. I think she stays at the top of the game, but I think Rybakina is the one who's going to be looking to dethrone her next year because she's back in the zone.
Yeah, it comes to the consistency in the team, as you say. I think it's a big part, especially in women's tennis. I think it's really, really important that you have that trusted group that you can spend your time with on and off court. And going back to what Kevin said, when it comes to the social media side of things, I think her popularity has massively risen from, being online and showing behind the scenes. And I think this is an area in the tennis world where we are behind other sports. Other sports really do show, a lot of what goes on outside of their competition, right? And I think in tennis, I actually listened to a bit of Roddick's podcast, Serve podcast, this morning, actually, talking about how players and creators cannot get any access to any form of match footage. And so, how can we highlight our game without showing these moments? He mentioned Coco Gauff, where when she's winning a match point in a Grand Slam, she can't share that footage of that moment. It's nuts. And so I think, tennis does need to move forwards, and we need more players like Sabalenka. I know Sinner created a YouTube channel. It's quite kind of polished and more let's say media trained sort of content, whereas Sabalenka just lets loose and is her honest self. But I think it would be awesome to see more players doing this sort of thing.
The other thing I want to add to that is the NBA lets you use all its footage on social media. So it's on YouTube, fans, whatever it likes, and it gets you a bigger reach. So I think, maybe they need to knock on the door of the WTA and ATP and say, come on, let us use this footage, or at least let it use for winning on slams, winning at big master series, so that at least you can add some content in there, because that's how we drive more fans to our game.
And equally, people watching this podcast, instead of looking at our ugly mugs on the screen, they could watch some, forehands and backhands.
Well, you can always put some clips in there. Get to work, Ashley.
So number 8, talking about the role of the professional tennis coach. And over the years, the coach's role at tour level has changed quite considerably. With the introduction of on-court coaching, that got introduced quite a few years ago on the WTA tour, but more recently on the ATP tour. And I just feel that over the last year or so, especially on the men's tour, because it is a newer thing, players are becoming more and more reliant on their box on the court. Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, that's up to us to debate. But it's I do think when we're looking at kind of Carlos's situation at the moment, I do wonder how that's going to look over the next few months. In the past, there were players that could get by without coaches. I know Federer didn't have a coach for a while. Osaka, you mentioned just a second ago, Greg, as well. She went for a stint without having a coach. But I almost feel like the players nowadays are a bit more needy, and I feel like they need their coach courtside.
Yeah, I would say even during my generation, Tony Nadal was known as coaching from the first ball to the last ball, even though he wasn't technically allowed to do it. Lots of the Spanish coaches have done that through my time, or they hide behind the chair umpire in the past and doing it. So that's why they allowed the rule to come into the men's game. I think it's always been there. Why are you going to invest so much money in having a coach there without being able to talk to them, get a little bit of thought? You still, as a player, have to be able to execute. And sometimes you can muck up the player by saying too much or saying the wrong thing. So that's where a relationship works very well. And that's why we had the discussion about Juan Carlos Ferrero and Carlos Alcaraz, whether he will continue on the track that he is because of that relationship and the discussion. Yes, Samuel Lopez has a great record with him, but when it comes to the majors, it was Juan Carlos giving the advice and the chatter and keeping him calm. And you got to remember, Juan Carlos won the French Open. He was world number 1. He went to the U.S. Open finals. He knows what to say and when to say it because he's been in that box experiencing it. So if you invest for the best coaches or the right person, let them speak. The thing I would love to see, mic them up. Let's get the volume. Let's see what they're saying. Is it just come on? Is it tactical? When we saw with Shelton this year, when he won in Canada, you could hear the dad speaking to him and asking him, this is what I think you should do, but it's your decision. You make the choice. And for me, coaching works, and the best teams do it better than the rest.
We saw it in
Totally
Australia.
agree.
Didn't we? The Australian Open, we saw the coach almost, Andy Murray, was sat in that box with Novak, and he was kind of like, there was almost like a spotlight shone on him, and we could hear what he was saying. And Andy hated it, he said. I know he didn't like being the star of the show, so to speak. But I mean, a lot of people, certainly from your generation of players, Greg, think players should go out and work it out themselves, and they shouldn't be getting told what to do. So I mean, that's sort of the different dynamic you had compared to the team. The teams now are so big, aren't they?
Well, you've got to figure it out on your way up there. So when you're playing what's known as the futures, then going to the challengers, then all the way through, you can't afford to have that team. So you take any advantage you can to try to win these majors. And I think you still have to learn how to figure it out, because under pressure 30-40, you still have to execute on break point up or break point down and play the shot. So I could give you the advice, Kevin. I'm not sure you could execute it under pressure. I mean, I'm a little bit more confident about Ashley doing so than you at the moment.
Thanks, Greg. I'll take that. But on that topic, I think as well as the skill of coaching, there's also a lot of data available now. You see the coaching teams actually get given a tablet courtside now, don't they, with tons and tons of data on their player and their opponent as well. And I think moving forwards to 2026 and beyond, there's actually going to be a lot of AI involved in that too.
Yeah, there definitely will. And I remember when I was in the U.S. Open in New York, I was with Mike James when I was working with Vika, and we looked at the tablet. We saw the opponent's backhand was the weaker side, and you were winning 75% of the points, and just trying to convince her to get into that side, because not always the player will take on the advice, but you have to get that related across, and then sometimes use the technology to your advantage. So these are the little wins you have to have sometimes. So I'm for it. I know some people are against it. Andy didn't want to be in the spotlight, but if you're a big name coach to a big superstar like Novak, you're going to always be in the spotlight, and the media, the broadcasters will be always looking for what they have to say.
Let's get mics on them.
Yeah, why not? Or,
Absolutely.
there was even when the WTA had them sitting on the bench with them at the change events. That would be fascinating. For me, one thing I'm really enjoying is when they show us the practice sessions at the Master Series. And you can watch Alcaraz practicing with Rublev, or who your favorite players are, and learn what drills they're doing and seeing what's happening out there, because the more people see, the more they understand why these guys are such phenomenal athletes, as well as the women who are phenomenal athletes in the WTA Tour.
One interesting point on practice, Greg, was I was watching actually Stephen Hendry's YouTube channel. He had Andy Murray on, and Andy was talking about how he used to practice with Federer when he was growing up. And then after a while, Federer decided he didn't want to practice with him anymore. Once he became a threat, he didn't want to practice with him. Did you have to work out who you didn't want to practice with, or were you an open book?
I didn't want to practice with Jeff Tarango, because I practiced with him in Hong Kong. I hit a short volley and he tubed me in the middle of the chest. And I said to my coach, that's never happening again with that practice session. But usually the great players will practice with the up-and-comers, as we saw Nadal practicing with Carlos a lot, spending time with him, trying to figure out that new buck. Sinner was in there a lot with Djokovic as well, and Djokovic took a lot of time with Carlos, because both players are trying to figure out where their weaknesses, where their strengths are. And if the top dog feels that it's more benefit to the young gun coming up, practice stops very quickly between those two players.
Okay, number 9, guys. I'm going to go with my 2 players to watch for next year. I wouldn't say they're underdogs. I'm going to go with Naomi Osaka to get to a Grand Slam final, and she came sort of pretty close at times last year. She was flirting with getting there. She was working with Patrick Mouratoglou first half of the year, and that didn't kind of work out. When she left Patrick, she suddenly got to the Canadian Open final, where she lost to Mboko, we've already spoken about earlier. I think Naomi is the kind of player, if she gets on a run, she's not going to do it every week, I don't think, anymore at this stage of her career. If she gets on a run, she's got the temperament. She's not going to be frazzled by something like a quarterfinal of a US Open if she gets there. So I think possibility she could get to a Grand Slam final this year. Is that a bold call, Greg?
I think it's pretty bold out there. I'm Boko. Really, optimism is the big breakthrough on the WTA side, with Rybakina getting her form back to where she once was. But you can never discount a great champion. I've done it in the past, and they've made me look rather stupid. So I'm not going to totally disagree with you on that. but it depends how her off season was. Has she added to her game? How's her movement? You got to remember, everybody's improving, and so is that next generation coming up. And the depth in the WTA at the moment is rock solid. I mean, I was on tour there last year, and I can tell you the work ethic, what's being putting in, and also the variety that's being added into the women's game as well. So, it's a good shout there. I wouldn't disagree with you, but you got to do it. You got to prove it.
My other player to watch, actually, you might be able to chip in on this, is João Fonseca. He's in the top 30 already, and everyone was bigging him up as being the next big thing, the guy who could potentially challenge Sinner, Alcaraz. I'm not convinced yet that he's quite there. I've seen flashes of brilliance. He's certainly got great charisma. He's got great sort of passion on the court, and I think that's attracted such a big social media following. I know he was offered huge money. He was offered apparently $1 million to go and play US college tennis last year and turned it down, which was probably a good decision given what he's done since. But can he go to the next level? That's the big test for him now. He's still young enough. He's got plenty of time in his hands. He's got 2 or 3 years to make his mistakes and get to the top. If he could get to a Masters Series final this year, I think that would be an amazing achievement. If he could get at the back end, a second week of a Slam, a quarterfinal somewhere, that would be incredible as well. I think he'd be great for the sport. He could be the real next superstar if he does it, but still question marks to answer. I think he's not quite there yet, but he's certainly very promising.
I would love to see him go deep in a 1000 or a Slam, and I think he's definitely got the game for it. He just needs time on court, and I actually think he needs another couple of years yet. The tour at the moment is so deep. Of course, yes, we've got Jannik and Alcaraz, head and shoulders above the rest, but there is a big pool of players beneath them who, although are struggling to challenge the top two. They're all a good level, and for João Fonseca, his charisma, the hype train that he's on can only get you so far, and I think he just needs time on court to really feel his way and to find his game. He's got big shots, but he really needs to find his identity on the court, I think.
Yeah, I think he's a good call to improve. I mean, he was gangbusters in Australia last year where he beat Rublev. I thought, wow, who is this kid? But I feel like he hasn't pushed on to that next level, and we'll find out in 2026. Got a new haircut, shaved off all the hair as well, too, so a little bit more aerodynamic. But the guy who's impressed me a lot is Lerner Team. Hired a certain guy by the name of Michael Chang, world number 2, French Open winner, multiple Slam finalists at the Australian and multiple other Slams. One of the greats of the game. That really shows intent. Another lefty as well. Remember the breakout in Australia where he beat Daniil Medvedev. He's gone up a notch. And let's not forget the guys that won that next generation tournament: Tsitsipas, Sinner, Alcaraz, Draper. They haven't done too bad, those guys. So I have a feeling that he's one to watch out for in 2026. And I hear that Chang is destroying him on the practice court. He is shocked how many hours he's having to do on court. And he said, I think I heard he said something to the extent where, now I understand why these guys are at the very top because of what he's having to put in. And his name is fascinating. He's called Lerner because of the fact that his mother was a teacher, his father was a mathematician, and he wants to learn. This is a guy who started tennis at 1 year old, he was homeschooled, was a year ahead in classes, so very analytical, very smart out there, and tactically astute. So I would put Lerner Teen in the picture with Fonseca to watch out for. Are they ready to win a Slam? No. Can they go deep at Masters Series and the Slams? Yes, if they put it all together.
I'm learning that you have a massive soft spot for lefties.
Yeah, I love a lefty. Anybody who's left-handed gets my vote. Number 10 is our podcast, Off Court with Greg, with obviously Kevin Palmer for 365, Ashley Neaves, the tennis mentor, one of the greatest coaches in this country, in the UK. We are going to be having a weekly program every Monday. Please listen and watch us on all things from YouTube, Spotify, or Apple. Join the podcast because we're going to have some great guests in 2026, and any breaking news, we're going to do off-court cuts as well. So give us a follow throughout the year. We're excited to start this adventure. We're early on. We promise you we're going to get better week in, week out with newer guests. So please listen, enjoy, and I hope you enjoyed listening to us early on here in 2025. But here's to a great year of the podcast in 2026.